I heard you make the point yesterday, Courtney, with Pat, the designer, on the podcast, that you liked this process because at least the Bears weren't just sticking in their comfort zone, going with a bunch of guys that Matt Eberflus knew that he'd coached with in the past. I think it's a salient point and one that needs to be repeated. Why is that valuable, you think, for this offense going forward?
Well, they got a nice pool of candidates, and I, for one, I was skeptical when we had heard. If you go back, I guess it would have been 4 weeks ago today, when they decided to fire Luke Getsy and 4 other coaches and retain Matt Eberflus. Naturally, a coach who at that point doesn't have a contract extension, and the thought of perpetuating the cycle if they do end up moving on from Justin Fields and getting a rookie quarterback and pairing him with a coach who's going into a must-win year, it didn't feel at that point like it was they were setting themselves up for the widest of coaching searches, the best of coaching searches. But I will say, even with the offensive coordinator position alone, to interview 9 coaches for one position, 4 that came from the same tree, really 5 if you threw Clint Kubiak in there. They did their due diligence. And I think, Shane Waldron's name was the first one that came up in the coaching search. They landed that name. The first one we heard is the one that they landed. And of course he was getting, looks from the New Orleans Saints, and they did it in a timely manner. This staff that they're assembling right now, aside from the offensive coordinator, these are all people that Shane Waldron has coached with. So for him to be able to convince Thomas Brown, Chad Morton, Kerry Joseph to come with him from Seattle or from Los Angeles, where they overlapped prior, and be part of this staff, I think that that's obviously a very good sign that Waldron's building an offensive staff with guys that he feels can run and deploy the system that he had the last couple of years, and the system that is prevalent across the NFL. But big picture wise, the Bears have really done their due diligence here, and that's I don't think it's fair for people to take victory laps one way or the other just yet and say, man, these are awesome hires, it's going to be so much better than the previous staff. Man, this is an awful hire. How do you know? I can't stand when I see that stuff on social media, because frankly, people who are saying that don't honestly have a damn clue if the hires are going to pan out or not. What you can be happy with, though, is the process, because it's not falling into the category of this is the way that we've always done things, promote from within only, or hire people that you've worked with before only. This is a very thorough search, and they've got what we know on paper, at least, and certainly from other experiences that you can track record wise, good teachers. That's one of the first things that Matt Eberflus talked about needing in his coaching staff, people who can teach. And like Yurko was saying, that means knowing the limitations of your players. That means knowing what they can do, what they can't do, what they need to get better at, and being able to tangibly show them how to get from point A to point Z, and show that growth that maybe the offense lacked and certain players lacked last year because of the coaching element, and where that fell in kind of that pie chart of blame for what went wrong offensively.
How many teams do you think are going to kick the tires on Justin Fields and call the Bears and at least inquire? And I wonder how that would compare to how many teams are calling to talk about moving up to number 1. The only reason I would think that pool's a little small is because you're probably only talking about a handful of teams somewhere within the top 10 that can feasibly make that happen. Otherwise, the jump is too big. But what kind of calls is Poles going to get about Fields this offseason?
Right. And you mentioned that article that we did. It was an exercise across the league about the quarterback movement that we could see. And, the Raiders were the team that I orchestrated a trade with here in the proposals that I received in this exercise. Atlanta obviously makes sense, but does it make sense for them to want to move up, give up the 8th overall pick, which has been brought up a couple of different times? Certainly if they're offering that, if you're the Bears, you take that. I'm sorry. No matter what you think about Justin Fields, that falls into the offer you can't refuse category. Mm-hmm. But, the Raiders make sense. The Atlanta Falcons make sense. There's probably anywhere from 2 to 4 teams that I could see viewing Justin Fields and his skill set, bringing him in and giving him a second chance on of where, kind of, I don't want to say resurrecting his career because I don't feel like his career's really taken off yet, but continuing the progression that we saw from him in the second half of the season when he came back from injury. There will be teams who say we can be the ones to him to reach his fullest potential. That always happens in the NFL. And when you take a look at trade value and what a player like him could command in a trade, I think you have to go back to, the most recent example of that is Josh Rosen getting a second-round pick from Miami when they hired a new staff. They brought in a first-year head coach, a first-year, and then used the first overall pick on Kyler Murray. Like, it should be no less than a second-round pick for someone like Justin Fields because he's much more proven than a Josh Rosen was in the team that went 3-10 that year before he got shipped off somewhere else. And there will inevitably be somebody out there who thinks that their staff is the one to get the most out of Justin. Now, whether that happens or not remains to be seen, but it's not as if the Bears will not get any calls on this quarterback. Whether they want to do anything with it is a different story.
All right. Prediction on what happens with Jaylon Johnson come March. Contract extension or franchise tag?
If this thing goes to a franchise tag, after all the talking that's been done by both sides about how, with what Ryan Poles said a couple weeks ago that he's not going anywhere, like you don't say if you're going to tag someone. So I would like to think that the silence right now is not necessarily indicative of how far apart both sides are, but rather that this is the negotiating process coming back to the table. They weren't just jumping right into this right away at the end of the season when they had a coaching staff that they had to figure out. And the hires and the process there, you typically don't see extensions for players, lined up until February, March. I mean, certainly the start of the new year triggers a lot, but I think he gets an extension before the start of the new league year, around St. Patrick's Day, and I don't think he gets franchise tag.
Got it. Good stuff. All right, Courtney, thank you. Good article today. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thank you, guys. Take care. And congrats on the extra hour. I think
Thanks.
it's awesome.
Oh, we appreciate it, Courtney. Thank you. There's
right,
Courtney
bye,
Cronin on the CarX Tire and Auto Guest Hotline. Make sure you follow her on Twitter. On X, she's a must-follow for all the latest and greatest. And check out what she and some of the other NFL reporters did on ESPN.com today. It's a good story.
Sometimes it also means when he's not going anywhere, we've got the franchise tag in our back pocket.
I like the way she summed that up, though. They did have some other pressing issues. They had to replace a lot of coaches. It would stand to reason that they get a longer-term deal done with him.
They both, I think, were amicable in the fact they wanted to get a deal done.
Yes.
Then at the end of the year, Jaylon Johnson says, well, now I've reset the market. Okay.
We'll see.
We'll see. And that's in essence what your negotiators are saying.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see. You probably have. Yeah. But we hope now that you've reset the market, we hope you can be patient.
We were going to set the market.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Carmen, the smaller, less athletic, but more handsome half of the Carmen and Yurko Show. Thanks for watching the YouTube channel. And make sure you download the ESPN Chicago app. You can listen on demand anywhere, anytime.